I've saved my progress as guidegroup1.ai found inside the O8 type folder. And in this exercise, we're going to take this group of objects that we've created here, the rectangle and the two vertical lines, and we're going to duplicate them onto artboards 2 and 3. But before we do, I need to make another adjustment, this time to the margin guide. And to show you why, I'm going to switch over to Final Formatted Limerick once again, also found inside the O8 type folder. And just as we need to compensate for our flush left text to make sure that the page doesn't appear to list over to the left-hand side, we also need to compensate for the weight between the top and bottom of the page. So notice that the top of all my text is tight to the top margin, whereas the bottom of my text is loose from that margin. That means that I need to move things down a little bit to once again keep the text elements more or less centered on the page. And again, this is a very typical way to work. You want to have a bigger top margin than you have a bottom margin when you're working inside of just about any design program. And what I'm going to do is move the top of this rectangular margin guide down 1/4 of an inch. So I'll switch back to my document in progress, and I'm going to press the A key to switch to my white arrow tool, and I'm going to marquee around a portion of the top of the rectangle, so that I select this top segment independently of all the other elements in my document, and I'm now going to move this segment downward. And because I want to perform a relative movement, not to mention I'm also working with a partially selected object, I'm not going to work from the transform panel this time. Instead, I'm going to bring up the move dialog box. There's a couple of ways to get to it. You can go to the object menu, choose transform, and choose move. You also have a keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-M or Command-Shift-M on the Mac. But typically, that's not the way you work. Rather, you double-click on one of your arrow tools. So if you want to move whole objects, you double-click on the black arrow tool. If you want to move partially selected objects, you double-click on the white arrow tool. And that's what I'm going to do. I'll double-click on the white arrow tool. That brings up the Move dialog box. I want to leave the horizontal option set to 0, and I'll take the vertical option up to 1/4 inch, like so. And then I'll press the Tab key, and that'll go ahead and automatically convert that measurement to 18 points. So it's 0 for horizontal, 18 for vertical. Preview's turned on so I can see the results of my modification. Now I'll click OK. And that went ahead and moved the top of my margin guide down 1/4 of an inch. And to see the difference, this is before. So notice it used to be higher, and this is after. And I did that by pressing Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac, and then Control-Shift-C or Command-Shift-C on the Mac. All right, now let's duplicate this entire group of guides. So if I twirl open the guides layer, I've got this page 1 group right there, meatball it in order to select the whole darn thing, or you could click on it with the black arrow tool. And we want to move this guy over so it's centered inside of the central artboard. And I'm going to scroll my document a little bit so I can see the entirety of that second artboard. Now, you may recall that each artboard measures 700 points wide, and each one of the gaps is 72 points wide. So if we move the group 700 plus 72, we should be in good shape. All right, so I'm going to double-click on the black arrow tool this time because we want to move an entire group of objects. So whole objects at a time, you double-click on the black arrow tool. Partial objects, you double-click on the white arrow tool. And notice that Illustrator brings up the last movement that I just performed. I don't want any vertical movement this time, so I'm going to set the vertical value to 0 points. And then I'll press Shift-Tab to back up to horizontal. And I'll enter 700 plus 72. Now, I could have just as easily entered 772. The math is pretty simple, but I want you to see that you can do math, once again, inside of this dialog box. And then I'll press the Tab key in order to confirm that those are the right numbers. And notice, indeed, I have moved that group into exactly the proper location. I'll click on the Copy button in order to create a copy of those guides. And now I'm going to go ahead and rename these new guides there, Page 2, here inside the Layers panel. And I'll move Page 2 under Page 1 just so that I can see the guides in a proper order here inside the Layers panel. All right, I want to re-perform that duplication. So I'll scroll over to Artboard 3, and I'll press Control-D or Command-D in order to invoke the duplicate feature, that is the Transform Again command. And I'll go ahead and rename this new group Page 3 this time. Click OK. and then I'll drag it down to below page 2. So we've got page 1, page 2, and page 3. The next step is to grab all 3 of these groups, and I'll do that by Alt-clicking or Option-clicking on the Guides layer in order to select all of the objects inside of that layer. And now I'll go up to the View menu, I'll choose the Guides command, and I'll choose Make Guides, which is Control-5, Command-5 on the Mac, and that goes ahead and converts all those objects into guides. There's just one more guide that I want to add, and that's a horizontal guide through the center of every single one of these pages. So I'll go up to the horizontal ruler, and I'll drag a guideline down until it snaps into alignment with the center point of any one of these rectangles. And that goes ahead and adds a horizontal guideline through all 3 of my artboards. Now, I should be able to see this new guide here inside the Layers panel. This particular version of Illustrator that I'm using, it's a pre-release version, and it's got a little bit of a bug. Your version of Illustrator may or may not have this bug, but if it does, what you do is you go up to the View menu, you choose Guides, and you choose Lock Guides to turn it off. And then the guideline mysteriously appears. And I'm going to go ahead and name it H-Center and click OK to indicate that we have a horizontal center guide. That is the new guide. If I meatball it, you can see it runs through the center of all 3 of the artboards. So I'm good to go. And that, my friends, polishes off the contents of the Guides layer. I'm going to go back to the View menu, choose Guides, and choose Lock Guides to turn it back on. Control-Alt, semicolon, Command-Option, semicolon on the Mac. And I'll return to Artboard 1, click on it. And now that we've established the margins and other guides inside of our document, we are ready to import the text.